All right. I know it's been quite a while since I've done one of these, or even had the time to really sit and make a video, or even talk about some of the things that I'm doing here with modding, tracking down bugs, things like that. I had a lot of things I'm doing in house right now, but some things I'd say I'm about 2/3 of the way done, but I'm going to start shifting project attention away from those things over to more software related, because I kind of like to flip things around a little bit, and just to kind of keep things fresh, and so I don't burn out in particular areas. Okay, so a couple things that I wanted to talk about are some things that I noticed. There was I'm going to fire this off, and that way we can get back into Fallout 4 and kind of talk about it as I go. There was a problem with loading objects, where the objects, the what you visually saw was loaded, but the actual collision was separated from the object. I have not seen that. I haven't seen that recently. So I noticed that in this, I think it's this particular playthrough, maybe. This is pretty much the same load order that I've been using. I kind of add some stuff to it, and then when I get crashes, I'll occasionally create a brand new load order, just to let me turn this down some, just so I can kind of say, okay, I'm going to start fresh and make sure that it's not adding a bunch of mods. Generally, I don't delete mods, because I know that can cause a problem, especially with injected stuff, because I think it's hard coded and it causes a lot of scripts and things to be orphaned. But I did notice, okay, one of the things I did notice, like so on the newer settlements, like when I just recently, and I mean like within a past week or so, even maybe 2 weeks, probably 2.5 to be, if I really wanted to be like accurate. So in a couple weeks, I noticed that settlements that I had built up using transfer settlements. I mean, I built them myself, they're fine. But then when I did a transfer settlement, everything was fine. But then when I would come back in to the settlement, let's make sure this doesn't crash. I've been having a problem with classic holstered weapons, but I think I found the conflict, and I'll get to that here in just a little bit. So the ones that I've recently built, I have not had a problem with at all. Every time I go into the settlement, the objects are all there. The collision is now associated with the object. So I don't know if that's part of what Bethesda, I don't know if it's like a shadow patch, because I'm using the Steam version, so I don't know if it's a Steam version shadow patch that came through, or what. I'm not sure what changed. The only thing that was different was, and it's a little bit laggy in here, the only thing that was different was, at least from what I could tell, is there were fans, these fans here. If you notice how the fan's moving now, I actually had multiple fans on top of each other. So once I removed those, that was fine. But there was I'm kind of redoing all this, but there was a wood board over here. There was a wood board I had here. It was a floor piece that I had here. I've removed it and made this a picnic area. But as I would go, and that right there had no collision. So the wood board had no collision, and in workshop mode, I couldn't select it. I could still select it in console. But as I was running down the street, I could see that I moved up in the air, and I heard the thumping of a board. But there's no board here. So that's because the collision and all of that was separated from the board. So once I removed the boards, and to remove it, what I had to do is I had to go into console mode. And I know console players, like, PS4 players and Xbox players, they won't have this option. But I was able to go into console mode and actually select that particular object, and then I could do a disable and mark for delete, which I'm assuming is going to be just fine. And it's not been a problem since. So almost every time when I came back to a settlement, if I was to use a flooring or even some walls, there were problems. So over here, I've been playing this for quite a while now, and I went in and I removed, from what I could tell, because once the objects have lost that collision, they stay that way, and I think that has something to do with the way they're flagged. I believe it was a flag to be honest with you. That was what I was guessing. So once they were flagged bad, it would constantly happen, and it was random or something. As you can see now, the flooring works, no problem. I just loaded into the game. All the walls work just fine. The floors work here. So everything is now as it should be. So settlement building, to me at least, is back to normal. If I was to even, and I don't think it's anything I've done. What I mean is somehow that I've incidentally corrected it. I think that it was a patch that was somehow put in. I do notice that when I map the game folder, I do have a change in the exe. So that may be it, and that could be from a previous thing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the difference is. I haven't really looked at it to compare the files and stuff. I don't really want to go that deep, but I do know it doesn't exist. And that particular problem no longer rears its head. And I've done other settlements that I've imported, and they do not, right out of the box, using transfer settlements. And I'm assuming this is going to work for some settlements too, because I'm assuming it's a similar technique to import objects from a F4SE or even a Papyrus-wise thing. I believe it's going to be very similar. Now, with SS2, the actual... I believe it tries to rebuild precombines, but I'm not sure. I don't know that. I'm not that quote-quote intimate with the game engine itself. But I do know that problem seems to be okay, seems to be solved. Another thing I noticed was, I know some settlements too had I think it was a grid utilities DLL. And I've seen where others are having the problem where that does not work. It does not work for NG. And that's fine, because I noticed when I was working on the power grid. Oh, and just one final note. When I had deleted power grid, like let's say I deleted, I think it was a connector and I think it was a generator. Or the generator. I think in cases where there was a fan on the ceiling and I deleted the outside generator, which powered the fan off. In some cases, some of the fans stayed powered, even though there was no power to it. They should have instantly shut off. And then when I hooked power back up to it, I've seen other instances where fans now had power but wasn't moving, and I had to replace the fan. So what that does is that rebuilds the linkage. So somehow there's a problem still with the linkage. Now, whether that's caused, and I do know in Sanctuary, I did have transfer settlements pop up and say that there was power grid corruption, and it said it fixed it. So I don't know if it has to do with it being rebuilt, because I've seen other instances where there's been attempts to rebuild the power grid, but the actual nodes weren't, every particular angle of a node or linkage of a node wasn't walked. Therefore, it considered more of a logical sequential path, as opposed to being, walking every possible node to make sure every node is connected to every node. And I think the biggest offender of that was a small power pylon, one of the smaller 3-foot pylons, and I think that was in SUP S4SE. I'd seen that, and then somebody else mentioned it too, and then I think the mod author fixed it. Okay, so with transfer settlements, I do know that it has popped up and said I had power grid corruption, and I do know that it said it fixed it. So I don't know if that... I'm assuming that it works. If it says it fixed it, I'm going to have to assume at this point that it actually works. So if that's the case, for those that are having power grid problems, and this is not in a replacement for some settlements building or anything like that, or even importing through Workshop Framework. This is not a replacement, but it's a tool that, if it works, as Bruce once said, if you have a tool, you should use it. So if it does, if you're thinking it's corruption, it will only fix it once you go into workshop mode. So you can't wait until it's actually corrupted and it tries to access that node before it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. I'm assuming there's a reason the mod author did that. I'm guessing maybe because all the linkage isn't available remotely before the workshop loads, or maybe he needs to load to make sure, it has to load the cell to make sure everything is there and where it should be before he tries to update it. All right, we got some. All right. But I do know that it said it was fixed. So for those having that problem, if you install transfer settlements, you don't have to use the holotape. You don't have to use the import settlement terminal or nothing like that. But and I wish he had a standalone version. I do. I wish it was an absolute standalone version, to where it didn't need all the other, just the DLL and then being able to repair it. I wish it had that. It does not. So you could use that to see if there's power grid corruption, to see if it can actually fix it. Now, what I noticed when I had power grid corruption in Sanctuary was the actual settlement got incredibly laggy. And I do mean incredibly laggy. So I was like, okay, what's up with this? And then I finally realized that that was due to the power grid, because it popped up right when, and I think it only does it when you enter. I don't know if I don't think it does it while you're in the actual settlement. So what you'd have to, like when you're in workshop mode, it does it once you enter workshop mode. So I think there's a test for it. And what you almost have to do is, even though you build things in workshop mode, exit out, go back in and see if it can locate something. See if it can locate any type of corruption. Now, I'm assuming with some settlements, and this is just as an idea, with some settlements, well, with some settlements too, is when it actually rebuilds, or as a city plan is built, it's going to remove objects and replace it with others. So it probably wouldn't hurt to check that by going into workshop mode. I know it's a pain, but it is an option to at least try to preserve the power grid, and the integrity of the power grid linkage in the nodes. Let's see, we got something here, and yes, we do. Just to try to keep the integrity of it, so that way the game save doesn't isn't completely bust.
Critical damage.
So it might be worth a try to see if that works. But like I say, you can't do it remotely. Okay, that's transfer settlements. I have noticed, and I don't know why, but I did notice that I was picking up some crashes with classic holstered weapons, which was interesting because I'd never seen that one before. And I'll take you out and show you that real quick. So let's pause this and let's get back to our desktop here. Okay, so over here, I went ahead and left the overlay on, but let me take the overlay off so it makes it easier to see. There's like literally too much information. Okay, so you can see that there's one here. I've got classic, classic, classic. I think that's classic. Aren't these classics? No, not that one. That's transfer settlements. That one crashed because I think what I did is I didn't give the scripts time to finish in the background. I think I went away from the settlement or something, and I'm not really sure. So I very rarely get crashes with transfer settlements, and you can see that it's actually the DLL. So I'm not really sure. I might have moved something or something. I'm not sure. But you can see classic holstered weapons, classic holstered weapons, classic holstered weapons, and yeah, so there's like 4 of these. Well, what I didn't realize was I had modified the code, the application code that I'm still working on and putting features in for everybody. One of the features I put in was the ability to install a section. So if you look at the installation list here, you can see that I've broken it down into chunks or categories. And then you can install a section. So when I click install section, it'll actually just install, depending on what I click on. You know, this would be a section header, and this is just a category header. So if I click on a category header, it only goes to the next category. If I click on a section header, it'll actually install to the next section. And I did this to make it easy. If I'm doing a test, let's say that I'm actually doing a test of a load order, and I just want to say, okay, I know this block is good, so I can move this block up as a section. And that's the installation order. So as an example, if I'm installing, let's say, Reshade, or I'm installing the Fallout script extender, unofficial patch, or I'm installing F4SE plugins that would be part of what I would consider the very base game I would use, then, you know, that's without texture replacers and all that, just a very base game I would use, then I can install that in one section. So I was actually testing that, and what it did, it literally started doing exactly. I thought I'd actually coded it so that it would escape the function without doing any installs, but unfortunately that was not the case. So I noticed it was doing a bunch of installs, and what it did was it reinstalled the perk distributor, because I do have that on the list of things I was using back then. So it did install that, and I didn't notice that. So I noticed I started getting crashes over here where it was classic holstered weapons, and then I got this weird crash when a Mirelurk egg, which is right here, when a Mirelurk egg was, no, not that, I don't want to do that, whoops, that's right here, when a Mirelurk egg was spawned, it was right in here, there we go, that's what I was looking for. So I'm like, okay, and I've seen these crashes. Well, I haven't seen these crashes before, but I'm using Kimfluence now, and I've noticed other people are saying, okay, there's crashes, and people say Kimfluence is the issue. Well, of course, Mirelurks can't use Kims, so that should not be the issue. I would assume he would. I mean, knowing the mod authors' previous mods, and you know, the complexity of some of the things they've done, I can't imagine them not checking the race. So I thought, okay, well, that's weird. So I kind of wrote it off. But then when I started getting all these, I thought, well, that's odd, because, and it turned out to be the same NPC. There was nothing unusual about an NPC. At first I thought, okay, it's settlement visitors. I installed a settlement visitor mod. I thought, okay, it's got to be this, because there's a thing called a cat dog, and they got the same package. Cats have the same packages as dogs. They sleep in a dog house, and they walk up, and chickens walk up and down the street like Preston Garvey, which is kind of funny, but I kind of get it, because it's like an NPC thing, or a workshop kind of a thing. But and the mod's early, and I know the mod author's still working on that, so it's fine. I don't mind the little quirks. But at first I thought, okay, maybe it tried to put a weapon on one of those animals. But then I thought, well, they don't really have weapons, so they're unarmed, so nothing is there. So I checked out the NPC it was crashing on, because when you look at the buff out logs for these classic holstered weapons, it's always the same address. Well, I have two addresses that somebody else actually had posted, and it's almost always the same NPC. And when I checked, there was two NPCs I noticed, and when I checked, they weren't an animal at all. It was a human NPC, and he had a zap pistol. But that zap pistol wasn't the issue, because other people had zap pistols as well, including me. I had a zap pistol, and it put it on my hip when it was a pistol, and it put it on my back as a rifle just fine. So I wasn't sure what this was. So what I did was, I just happened to be looking through, and I'm like, wait a minute. There is a, because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to build this. I'm going to build an installable folder for some of my friends to check out. I want them to check out the game that I have. So in a sense, it's kind of like a mod pack, but it's not really a mod pack. It's just a fast, easy way for them to check it out without having to use a lot of download bandwidth, because it's already been done. And like I say, it's friends, so it's not that big of a deal. But anyways, and I'm like, oh, I better make sure that I remove the Spell Perk Distributor, because I think it was active when I built that installable folder. Well, lo and behold, I seen it up here in my current game. And I'm like, well, how'd that get there? And then I realized, oh, I bet you that was a throwback from when I accidentally started installing all the mods again from that section. And, of course, part of it was the interface mod, which I had to kind of fix. So that, and then I thought, okay, I'll just remove it. And once I removed it, which was down here, I removed it somewhere around in here. This won't really show it, unfortunately. because this does not show when I disable or delete mods over here. It doesn't really go that in depth. I honestly could add an entry in here and say this file was deleted, which would probably make more sense. But to do that would really, it would really increase the size of the manifest file even bigger than what it is, because I would not only have an entry saying that I uninstalled a mod, but I would have an entry saying that this mod was actually deleted. And I'm not really sure the best way to try to differentiate between those two actions. And, you know, those two differing actions, well, two different actions that have the same effect on a single file. How to look at that single file and say, okay, it came from these, you know, it's from one action, not another. So I can't really do anything like that, but I do know it was sometime down in there. And of course, you can see that I've updated mods consistently. Like I've updated mods, I've added some new mods in, and the game is actually remarkably stable. It's actually one of the most stable games that I have, so, or that I've ever done for Fallout 4. So it's pretty solid. I've played, I think, up to 7 hours up here. I think if I let me get rid of all of these overlays here, and I think up here it was like 7 hours. See, this is where it was up to like 7 hours, and there's like 6 hours, another 6 hours. So it's relatively, it's got to be the most stable game I had. And then of course, this is where, and I think the Mirelurk crash that I had, I think that was probably due to the Spell Perk Distributor, because there's just something it doesn't like. I think it's a conflict. I think somehow there's just an unnamed or unrealized conflict somewhere, and that's what's causing the issue. Because I was really almost getting, you know, coming back to Sanctuary or running into Sanctuary was almost guaranteed to crash. I've been back quite a few times now in this time period down here, from here down to here. So you can see the time periods that I've played, and I haven't had a crash going to Sanctuary, and that is my home base. So I have to come back there a lot and unload. So, and all I did was delete the Spell Perk Distributor DLL. I deleted that. So, or you can disable it. So like I say, I think there's a, and this is the NG version, so I think there's a conflict with it somehow. So that's how I resolved those crashes. I believe those are done. And I did let the mod author know that I am having the same crashes as another person, and by removing this mod, which I think there's a conflict somewhere in the perks, or maybe when he walks the perks or update the perk, maybe it's updating a list, or maybe it changed a list or did something that, you know, because I think all of these were null references. I think if I look at them, I think they were all null references. See, that's like a -1. So that's a -1. So that's like a -1 if you're looking at an unsigned long word. A signed long word would be -1, because I believe it uses the topmost bit. If I'm not mistaken, the topmost bit signifies whether it's negative or positive. The topmost bit being 0 would be a positive number. That's why a signed integer cannot have a large of a number as an unsigned. However, unsigned is always going to be a positive number. So that's the only thing I can think of, because I haven't had any problems with that since. So that covers transfer settlements. That covers, that covers transfer settlements. That covers the crash I've been having, which I think is a conflict with, I believe that's a conflict with Spell Perk Distributor. And I think that probably catches everything up. The frame rate's pretty good. I do want to work on the frame rate some to get the frame rate even better than what it is. I do have Atomic World in here, and I do have some other mods in here which add, I'll show you one of the locations. I actually really like Atomic World. It's I was looking for something to add some variety. I like to explore. Being a Fallout player, I like to explore locations. So what Atomic World does is it adds buildings and areas of interest like this all around the Commonwealth. So it makes the Commonwealth look lived in. It's not just major cities anymore and a few, and some unmarked locations. It actually is a lot of unmarked locations. I mean, it's a lot of locations that not necessarily is unmarked, but they give you a lot to experience when you're playing. It there is a patch for Atomic World and Boston Natural surroundings. That's why trees are actually going through the building. But it would be easy to go in here and make sure that this is actually a tree that can be removed. And the mod author said just post anything you find and he'll include it in the patch. But I kind of like the fact trees grow up through a building. In some cases it looks pretty cool. It looks like it's been there for a while. I know it's supposed to be, what, 200 years maybe? Or 70 years or something? I'm not really sure. And 70 years is a long time for a tree to grow. But I got Atomic World in here. And I've got a few other inside jobs, which kind of opens up some of the buildings. And to me, I like BT interiors, but I think it's too busy. And I know some mod authors can be sensitive, but this is just my personal preference. I know a lot of people love it, and that's okay. I tend to think it's more busy than what I think it should be. So, for example, if this was a BT interior, there is stuff crammed everywhere, and I guess a person could think that if let's take this dude out. I guess a person could think that if if somebody was consistently living in a particular, I guess he fell through the floor. Oh, there he is. If he was consistently, if an NPC was consistently living in a place over the years, then that would be their primary living space, and that would get crowded. There would have a lot of things, would collect over time. But I think the problem, at least for me, was variety. But I'm not really, this is not really a video about like mod critiquing, because that would be like a personal preference. And I think that sometimes personal preferences are important because they do give us insight as to, or even ideas. But I think it's too busy because there wasn't enough variety. They all look so busy, they all look the same. So there wasn't a lot of variety. Where with Atomic World, all the buildings that you see around everywhere, and they are everywhere, all of those buildings are basically just, they're minimal. There's minimal loot there. All right, so wanted to go ahead and just kind of talk about that and let everybody know. Let me get where I can get back here to the desktop. And there we go, because I'm using a different screen resolution. But yeah, everything's going good. Just wanted to share that with everybody and hope it helps. So I will chat at everyone later.